Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrindam. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Padam Vande Shri Guru. Okay, so welcome back to the Bhakti Shastra course. Today we'll be discussing Mantra 9 of Śrī Īśopaniṣad. And before we go to Mantra 9, just a correction from yesterday. So, in yesterday's mantra, while discussing the summary, it was pointed out to me by His Grace Damodar Prabhu that the positioning of the arrow was actually a bit incorrect. So, what we had done yesterday was that the form is made up of material elements and the fools were combined and they were called as Kanishtadhikaris, but it's not so. The Kanishtadhikaris think that the form is made of material elements and the fools also think the form is made of material elements, which is because of no appropriate knowledge for the Archa Vigraha. Okay, so this was some mistake in positioning of the arrow. So this was a mistake in the positioning of the arrow. So now this is how it should be understood. Fine. So now we'll get to Mantra 9. So till now we have discussed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and all this we have already recapped quite several times in this sessions. So today we'll be starting with Mantra 9. And if you see 9, 10 and 11 have been combined under one group, which is Vidya and Avidya. So all the three verses 9, 10 and 11 will be discussing about only these two things, Vidya and Avidya. And in a similar manner 12, 13, 14 will discuss about Upasana or worship. And then it will be categorized as demigod worship, impersonal worship on one side and worship of the Supreme Lord on other side. So these three mantras will discuss about that. So the mantras are such that the meaning of Vidya and Avidya will change depending upon the context in which these mantras come. So just to give you an overview, Mantra 9 will say that those who are in Avidya, they go to darkness, to dark regions, or they go to ignorance. Andhatama pravishanti. They are in darkness, they are in ignorance. Those who cultivate Avidya or nescience. And those who cultivate Vidya, they are even more into darkness. Okay. So normally when we think of Vidya, it is understood as proper knowledge or real knowledge or appropriate knowledge or factual knowledge, or as we discussed in our epistemology session, yathartha anubhava, knowledge as it is. But here it is speaking about that kind of Vidya which actually takes a person even to the darker regions that even Avidya will not take. Okay, so that's Mantra 9. In Mantra 10, then it will come to a more developed or further understanding of Vidya and Avidya, and it says that Vidya or Avidya will take you to one destination and Vidya will take you to another destination. Whereas in the 9th mantra, it is said Avidya will take you to ignorance, to darkness, and Vidya will take you to even more darkness. So the destination is darkness only. But in the 10th mantra, it is mentioned Vidya will have a different result, Avidya will have a different result. And in mantra 11, the same Vidya and Avidya will be used, but this time both Avidya and Vidya will help one to go to the supreme destination. How Vidya, that is in 11th mantra, Vidya would be the perfect knowledge, the proper knowledge, the spiritual knowledge, and even Avidya supports that Vidya. So Avidya and Vidya work together to take one to the highest destination. Okay, so if what this is in mantra 9, Vidya and Avidya will take you down. In mantra 11, Vidya and Avidya both will take you up if properly utilized. And in mantra 10, Vidya will give a different result, Avidya will give a different result. So each of these mantras is to be understood appropriately. Okay, what does Vidya mean in mantra 9? And it is not the same in mantra 10. And what does avidya mean in mantra 9, which is not same in mantra 11. So based upon the context or the arrangement of this text, and of course, based on the commentaries of our acharyas, we will try to understand how these three mantras, although speaking only about these two words, vidya and avidya, their meanings are different in these three mantras. And the similar concept is applicable to mantras 12, 13 and 14 as well, where upasana or worship is mentioned. We will not get it, but just to get over it, demigod worship, impersonal worship. Demigod worship is avidya, and impersonal worship becomes vidya, and both are horrible. Both are not the proper ways of worship. That's mantra 12. Mantra 13 is, if you do demigod worship, it will take you to a different destination. If you worship the Supreme Lord, it will take you to a different destination. And mantra 14 would be how this karma kanda activities or worship of even the demigods, understanding that they are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, it elevates, it purifies one to go to the highest destination. That's mantra 14. So 9, 10, 11 will speak about knowledge and ignorance. 12, 13, 14 will speak about worship, different types of worship, and how they take one down, how they take to different results, and how they ultimately support, take one back home, back to God. So this is the concept. So in the next 6 days, starting from today, we'll be discussing this. So this is mantra 9. Antham tamah pravishyanti ye vidyam ye avidyam upasate tato bhuya ivete tamo yau vidyayam rataha. Those who engage in the culture of nescient activities shall enter into the darkest region of ignorance. Worse still are those engaged in the culture of so-called knowledge. So, andham tamah pravishanti. Gross ignorance, darkness, pravishanti, they enter. Who enters into gross ignorance and darkness? Ye avidyam upasate. Those who worship nescience, or those who cultivate ignorance. Okay, now what cultivation of ignorance means, we will see. Tato bhuya ivete tamo. And still more than that, tato bhuya, than that, still more, te tamo, they go even to greater darkness. Who goes? Yau vidyayam rataha. Those who are engaged in the culture of knowledge. So those who cultivate knowledge, they go deeper into darkness, and those who cultivate avidya, they go into darkness, but comparatively it seems not that much. Those who engage in the culture of nescient activities shall enter the darkest region of ignorance. Worse still are those engaged in the culture of so-called knowledge. So, themes in the purport. First, Srila Prabhupada gives a comparative study of Vidya and Avidya, and at the start itself, he clears how Vidya, when mistaken, when cultivation of knowledge is not in proper direction, when it is mistaken or it's misguided, then it is more dangerous than avidya. What is the aim of real education? Vidya is actually self-realization. The meaning of the term vidya, real knowledge, is, or the aim is self-realization. But here in this mantra, comparative studies made as how vidya is more dangerous when it's misguided or mistaken. Then Srila Prabhupada spends a considerable amount of time in explaining about this Vedavada Rata. If you see the mantra itself, you have Vidyayam Rataha, which is rhyming with Vedavada Rataha. Okay, so Vidyayam and Vedavada. We have discussed Vedavada Rataha in Bhagavad Gita, 2nd chapter already. So, and during that time, we did discuss about how this Vedavada Rataha are actually not the proper followers of the Vedas, although they are engaged in cultivating knowledge according to the Vedic scriptures, but still they are misguided. So Srila Prabhupada gives a comparison to this Vidyayam Rataha and Vedavada Rataha. So what they should be preaching. So those who are engaged in Vedic knowledge, what should they be speaking? How they should be guiding the society? How they should be implementing the messages of the Vedas in their own life? This is given, and then Srila Prabhupada speaks what they are actually doing, how they are in darkness, why this Vedavada Rata people who are actually so-called cultivating Vidya, but then they are going down What is the reason behind that? How do we understand this? Then finally, this Maya Pahrita Jnana, one who imagines oneself or another man as worshipable, one who imagines himself as God. So although he's engaging in cultivating Vidya, but then he's misguided. So here, Avidya is sense gratification. And Vedavada Rata and Maya Pahrita Jnana, these two combine to become this Vidyayam Rataha, which is those who are fueling this sense gratification. They are more dangerous than those ignorant people who are engaged in sense gratification. Okay, so this is the message, and we will see the purport. This mantra offers a comparative study of Vidya and Avidya. Avidya or ignorance is undoubtedly dangerous, but Vidya or knowledge is even more dangerous when mistaken or misguided. Now, why is it so when it's mistaken or misguided? People in this material world are in ignorance. All living entities who are born in this material world, we are here because we are attached to matter. We are attached to this material body. So we are already in ignorance, where the starting point itself is that we identify ourselves with the body. That itself is the deepest of ignorance, because we are not this body, we are spirit soul. So avidya is there. But when this avidya is being propagated as vidya by this mischievous people, or the Vedavada people, or the Maya Pahrita Jnana people, who are these people who we see in this purport, then it's a form of cheating. Okay, because it's misguiding. So already people are in ignorance, and when someone pushes that person into more ignorance by claiming to be doing their highest welfare, correct? Now if there's a person and then he's already suffering, and then you tell him that by doing this particular thing, you will become happy. But then he is pushing him into much more darkness. What do we call that person? He's a cheater, correct? So those who propagate avidya in the name of vidya, they are the cheaters. They are misguiders, or because of their own mistaken knowledge, they propagate that throughout the whole world. So therefore, they go to even more darkness because of their cheating propensity, because of claiming to be in a position where they can lead the society. But where are they leading? Not to elevated platform, but even more down. They are going down. So therefore, they are even more dangerous. So this is the reason why Vidya, in this context, is even more dangerous when mistaken or misguided. This mantra of Śrī Īśopaniṣad is more applicable today than at any time in the past. Modern civilization has advanced considerably in the field of mass education. But the result is that people are more unhappy than ever before because of the stress placed on material advancement to the exclusion of the most important part of life, the spiritual aspect. This is evident in the modern society. Srila Prabhupada is pointing our attention towards that. And is saying in the field of mass education, so Srila Prabhupada discussed several times that this is slaughterhouse education, because the spiritual nature of the living entity is completely suppressed or literally destroyed in this mass education. What is being propagated? That once you educate yourself, then you can get to a nice job, or you can open a nice business and become happy by doing sense gratification. The whole setup of mass education is to make people engage more and more in sense gratification. So, although it is being told that with this much amount of scientific advancement, with this much amount of developments which have been made in the field of society, in the field of defense, in the field of all these things, the whole situation is only for making our material life comfortable. But the result is people are more unhappy. And the reason we have already discussed in previous mantras, that being spirit souls, eternal constituted parts and parcels of Krishna, we can be happy only when we are in contact with Krishna, when we develop our relationship with Krishna. And since that's not being done in this modern civilization, therefore people are unhappy. And stress is being placed on material advancement to the exclusion of the most important part of life, the spiritual aspect. So therefore, people suffer. As far as Vidya is concerned, the first mantra has explained very clearly that the Supreme Lord is the proprietor of everything And that forgetfulness of this fact is ignorance. Right? Ishavasamidam sarvam yatkinchit jagatyam jagat tena taktena bhunjita magrada kasasiddhanam. And then after that, other mantras also. This kurva nevehe karmani asurya namate loka. If you follow the Ishavasya principle, what happens? If you don't follow the Ishavasya principle, what happens? So we can say this mantra 9, 10 and 11 and also 12, 13 and 14 are kind of extension or explanation of one who follows the Ishavasya principle and one who does not follow the Ishavasya principle. Okay, so it can be expanded in that way, it can be understood in that way. Because till this point, a brief introduction has been given, and mantra 1 established Ishavasya principle, 2 and 3 speaking about those who follow it and those who do not follow it. Then 4 and 5 is speaking about the inconceivability of the Lord, and then 6 and 7 and 8. Till 8 we have understood the glories, the Mahabhagavata's vision in 6 and 7, and 8 is the transcendental form of the Lord. So this is like a synopsis of the Sambandha Gyan. This is what it is. Ishavasya, he is the supreme proprietor and controller. And then after that, then this is what we are supposed to do, this is what we are not supposed to do, this is how we understand the Lord, and this is how the Mahabhagavata sees it, and this is the transcendental form of the Lord. Right. After this, now from 9th mantra onwards till the 14th mantra, explanation will be given of this Ishavasya principle. Okay. With respect to cultivation of knowledge and with respect to worship. And finally, once one understands till the 8th mantra that the transcendental form of the Lord is the ultimate absolute truth, then prayers are there from 15 to 18. Okay. So that's how the flow goes. So it has already been discussed in mantra 1 that the Supreme Lord is the proprietor. The more a man forgets this fact of life, the more he is in darkness. In view of this, a godless civilization directed towards the so-called advancement of education is more dangerous than a civilization in which the masses of people are less educated. And this we can see in our society, in the traditional Indian or Indian society itself. If we see from the last 50 years, the village life used to be very simple. Okay, not that everybody in the village was completely self-realized or was into Krishna consciousness. It was not like that. But the life was simple. They were ignorant, but then it was going on in an okay manner. If you go and tell them about Krishna consciousness, about spiritual life, they had faith. They might not be worshipping Krishna with an intention of pure devotion, but they will have their own deities or a local temple where they would go, and they will live a regulated life. Okay, that kind of life which is conducive to some extent, not to major extent, to Krishna consciousness, where they are more simple, they are not so sophisticated, so they can accept Krishna consciousness or spiritual life in a much easier manner. Okay, traditional Indian life was like this. But after that, when with scientific advancement and other things, electricity was brought to the villages, and then gradually radio came, then television came, and all kinds of things came which can be seen in the television. So what has happened? People in those simple, who came from the simple families, when they see all those things in television, then they think that there is something more to gain, something more which can make me more happy, more satisfied. Then people start moving. So it's a very big topic, but then I'm just giving a very brief overview. You would already know this. That then people start moving from villages to the cities, and then they live a very horrible life in the cities because they do not have facilities. And even the minds of people who are in the villages, that's also corrupted because of this mass media, mass propagation. People of different varnas, they understood that, okay, if they are from the Shudra varna, if their family has been working just like a blacksmith or a potter, they do not have to get educated. They can just continue with their family business and sustain themselves, a simple life. But after this mass education, this movement of mass education, everybody should be educated. It's a very revolutionary idea that Srila Prabhupada taught us, that everybody should be educated. It's actually a violence to people of specific varna. Then when they get educated, then they want equality and equality in the society, then equal opportunities for sense gratification. And as scientific advancement develops more and more, then more and more gadgets are required, more and more facilities are required. Life in the city is considered to be better than life in the villages, simple life in the villages. So people's mind are completely transformed or bewildered because of these things. And now everybody wants to get on the top. So there is unnecessary competition. People are there on the highest level, although they do not possess the required intelligence or qualification. Just based on reservations, they come to the higher post and the society is put into chaos. So those who propagate this in the name of education, in the name of Vidya, are actually doing much, much more harm. The whole social setup is corrupted because of them. And that is why these leaders who propagate this, they go into even more darkness because they're guiding the whole society down to hell, to darkness. So this advancement of education is more dangerous than a civilization in which the masses of people are less educated. It's a revolutionary idea actually, because if you see the social setup now, those who are educated are considered always to be on a higher level than those who are not educated. But then we have to see it's not a proper understanding of the social setup of this human society. It's not that everybody should be educated on this mundane level. Everybody should be educated on the spiritual level, on Krishna consciousness, not on mundane education. So this we already discussed, that we should see equality on the spiritual level. The Pandita sees equality on the spiritual level, not on the bodily platform, not on the material level. Correct? So that is how it should be. Of the different classes of men, karmis, jnanis and yogis, the karmis are those who are engaged in the activities of sense gratification. In the modern civilization, 99.9% of the people are engaged in the activities of sense gratification under the flags of industrialism, economic development, altruism, political activism, and so on. So this is the modern society setup, right? Industrialism. What does industrialism mean? Where more sense objects are being manufactured with the idea that if you have all these different objects around you, it will make you comfortable, it will make you happy, it will make you satisfied. So this is the peril of industrialism. Economic development, the economy should develop. Altruism, we should help others. And political activism. Now we see that initially in traditional society, politics, actually not politics, but the administration of the society was just in the hands of the Kshatriyas, who are guided by the Brahmanas. The Vaishyas and Shudras don't get involved in all these administration activities at all. They just perform their prescribed duties, supporting the whole Varnashrama institution, the social setup. But now, you see, you go to any person, a laborer, will speak about politics, will speak about the leaders. He's given the right to vote. What qualification does he have to understand the whole social setup? But then he must vote. And he has no idea. He has all kinds of bad habits. Okay, I'm not really blaming the laborers, but just giving an example, a generic example of people who are also not very qualified, who may be engaged in all kinds of sinful activities. They have been given the right to choose their leader, okay, to choose someone within their community who has no qualification. And everybody you go to, specifically I have seen in Tamil Nadu, everywhere you go to, they will be very, very active in politics. They always have their ideas to tell to people. Okay, but why does the person who has no qualification of understanding how this social setup works, what is the consciousness of people, and how the qualification of people are varied, he cannot understand any of these things. But somehow, just to propagate his own community, to have a name in a society, and then in the name of nationalism on a broader extent, he also gets involved into all these things, although he does not have any qualification to do that. So this is because everybody thinks that they're qualified. And what knowledge are they gaining? Not only going to the schools, but also through these different media channels. Television is there, and now television is there within the hand. So many videos, or everything is available. Everyone who sees some 10 videos thinks he's an expert in deciding what should be the course of humanity, right? But that's not the way it should work, because there is qualification. People should have qualification. The society should be guided by the Brahmanas. That is proper, because the aim of life is spiritual realization. But now, when people are getting involved into all this industrialism, economic development, and political activism, the goal of life is not spiritual realization, because they don't even understand that they are not the body, they are spirit. The goal of life is just to propagate everything which is related to my body, which can give comfort to my body. If my leader is there on the top, I'm happy. But he's not doing anything for you, but still you are satisfied that he's from my community. And if you go and talk to people, they are really proud of this. Right? So this is all avidya, or it takes person to darkness. And because it's being propagated, therefore Vidya is more dangerous. Specifically in this particular slide, we are speaking about the avidya. Okay. All these activities are more or less based on satisfaction of the senses, to the exclusion of the kind of God consciousness described in the first mantra. So we are still speaking about avidya, sense gratification. In the language of Bhagavad Gita 7:15, people who are engaged in gross sense gratification are mudhas, asses. The ass is a symbol of stupidity. Namam dushkritino mudha. Those who simply engage in the profitless pursuit of sense gratification are worshipping avidya, according to Śrī Īśopaniṣad. It's profitless pursuit. You are pursuing something, but then there's no profit, because whatever you get, it does not satisfy you completely anyways. Then it's temporary, it's going to end. Happiness means that which does not end. But then what kind of happiness is that which always ends? And if happiness ends, then it leads to misery. So it's profitless pursuit of sense gratification. So those who are engaging in such kind of activities are worshipping avidya, according to this verse. And those who play the role of helping this sort of civilization in the name of educational advancement are actually doing more harm than those who are on the platform of gross sense gratification. Because already the fire is burning, and then we fuel the fire in the name of doing good to people. So therefore, it does more harm in the name of educational advancement. Srila Prabhupada gives an example. He says the advancement of learning by godless people is as dangerous as a valuable jewel on the hood of a cobra. A cobra decorated with a valuable jewel is more dangerous than one not decorated, because people are attracted to that jewel. So there are more chances of coming in contact with the cobra because the attraction is there in the jewel. Just like people are attracted, although avidya is being propagated in the name of vidya, people are more attracted to that because they think it will give them more satisfaction, it will give them more happiness. Obviously mundane, but it will give them more happiness. So just like if it's a normal cobra, people will avoid him. But if it's a cobra with this stone on top, then it will attract people. Right? So it's just like that. Modern civilization is just like that, because it attracts people. The greed is there. The stone is there, the greed is there. Similarly, the greed is being propagated by this society, which is propagating so-called vidya, that you can become more happy, you can become more satisfied, you can have more opulence. You have seen all these rich people, you can also have that, you can also attain that without much effort. So therefore, it's luring people out of their simple life, out of their comfort zone. So therefore, it's more dangerous. In the Hari Bhakti Sudhodaya 3:11-12, the advancement of education by godless people is compared to decorations on the dead body. So it's a famous verse Srila Prabhupada spoke on. Bhagavad Bhakti Hinasya Jati Shastram Japas Tapaha Apranasya Dehasya Mandanam Lokaranjanam. For a person, actually I'm reading from my reference here. For a person devoid of devotional service, birth in a great family or nation, knowledge of the revealed scriptures, performance of austerities and penance, and chanting of Vedic mantras are all like ornaments on a dead body. Such ornaments simply serve the concocted pleasures of the general populace. So material advancement is just a decoration on a dead body. In India, as in many other countries, some people follow the custom of leading a procession with a decorated dead body for the pleasure of the lamenting relatives. In the same way, modern civilization is a patchwork of activities meant to cover the perpetual miseries of material existence. It's a patchwork of activities. The patchwork basically means if something is broken or if something has to be fixed. If it's broken, then we try to fix it with some different objects. Correct? If a board is broken or if a table is broken or whatever, something is broken, then we try to do something, adjust something, fix it somehow so that it is made workable. But then does it retain the original strength that it had? No. Just like if there's a hole in a pipe and water is leaking from it, does not matter how much ever you do or whatever you do, it will sustain the water. If you put that M seal or whatever, it will sustain the water for some time, but after some time it comes off. the best course of action is to change the pipe itself. Correct? So this is like patchwork of activities. We are trying to fix something which we think is a problem. And then after that, what happens? We fix something and then it creates more problems. This is also explained. Prabhupada speaks about this in the lecture. The material world is like this. There is one problem. We try to fix that problem. We create much more problems. And then we try to fix those problems. When we try to fix those problems, then even more problems are created. And classic examples are there. We started industries, then it started pollution also. And then for pollution, then it started creating lots of diseases. And because of lots of diseases, now people have to increase the advancement in medical science. And this is one example. And then it goes on like this perpetually. Then people were hungry. They identified that as a problem. Then they started, we should use fertilizers and pesticides to solve that problem so that the crop is not eaten by the bugs and more is available. Fertilizers we put, more yield would be there. And then what happened? Because of the chemicals in the fertilizers, the yield increased, but it also injected chemicals into those grains. And when we started eating that, then people started various kinds of diseases. Cancer, which was not a problem before, now it has become a big problem. So we try to solve one problem, then we create many more problems. So it's a patchwork of activities. It never ends. It keeps on going. So this modern civilization is a patchwork of activities meant to cover the perpetual miseries of material existence. All such activities are aimed toward sense gratification. But above the senses is the mind. And above the mind is the intelligence. And above the intelligence is the soul. This is actual vidya. This is actual knowledge. Indriyani paranyahur indriyabhyah paramaraha manasastu parabuddhir yo buddhe paratastu saha. Better, or yo buddhe paratastu, from the buddhi, beyond the intelligence is you, parastu saha, that person. Who is that person? In that context, being spoken about the soul, the living entity. So therefore, since living entity is the highest, the aim of real education should be self-realization, realizing of the self, realizing of the soul, realization of the spiritual values of the soul. Any education which does not lead to such realization must be considered avidya or nescience. And to culture such nescience means to go down to the darkest region of ignorance. Now, Śrīla Prabhupada speaks about this Vedavadarata. After giving a comparative study of Vidya and Avidya, then he says, when we say comparative study, both of them are actually taken to darkness, but then we are doing a comparative study of which one is more tamasic. Okay, here Vidya is more tamasic. According to the Bhagavad Gita 242, 715, mistaken mundane educators are known as Vedavadarata and Maya Pahrita Jnana. They may also be atheistic demons, the lowest of men. Those who are Vedavadarata pose themselves as very learned in the Vedic literature, but unfortunately they are completely diverted from the purpose of the Vedas. So we have been discussing what the purpose of the Vedas is from our epistemology sessions itself. They are completely diverted from it. Although they follow the Vedas word to word, all the rituals are being done properly, all the sacrifices are being done properly, but it's because they do not know the purpose behind these Vedic literatures, they are completely misguided. And an example comes in Srimad Bhagavatam, when Krishna and his friends, they are hungry, and they go to this Yajnik Brahmanas who are engaged in these sacrifices. They are the Vedavadaratas. What is the goal of their sacrifice? To serve Krishna, right? To see Krishna, to serve Krishna, to develop a relationship. And here they are doing the sacrifice. Krishna is standing right in front of them, asking for something to eat. They said, no, go off. We are engaged in this sacrifice. We will not come and give you anything. So this is this Vedavadarata people. And they are sophisticated people. They know all these rituals. They are perfect in following the Vedic culture. They chant all these mantras very nicely. Sophisticated people think they know the purpose of the Vedas. But those who do not know the purpose of the Vedas, for them all this activity is just fruitless. Just like in this, Krishna says, that just if one knows that the purpose which can be served by different wells can be served by a huge reservoir of water. Similarly, one all desires. Yavan arthodapane sarva sarvata sampradodake tavan sarveshu vedeshu brahmanasya vijanatah. So one should know the purpose behind the Vedas. And if he knows that, then all his necessities would be fulfilled. These Vedavada Ratha people, they neglect all the spiritual necessities, they are engaged only in materialistic activities. So these Brahmanas were like that. And the wives of the Brahmanas, they were more intelligent. They knew the purpose of their husband's sacrifices. So they went and served Krishna. And they achieved perfection. This is the Vedavada Ratha people. In the Bhagavad Gita 15:15, it is said that the purpose of the Vedas is to know the personality of Godhead. Vedas is this one, no? Sarvasya Chaham Vedasya Vishnu Matasprita Jnanam Apurnam Cha Vedeshcha Sarvai Ahameva Vedyah Vedantakrit Vedavid Eva Chaham. But these Vedavada Ratha men are not at all interested in the personality of Godhead. On the contrary, they are fascinated by such fruitive results as the attainment of heaven. These Vedavada Ratha are those who are cultivating knowledge, but to go to the heavenly planets. And then the cycle continues. They go to heavenly planets, then they come down. The cycle continues, and ultimately they also go to the darkest regions and then come up. And anyway, even if you attain the position of Lord Brahma, it is still darkness, because that person is within this material world. So the material world is dark. As stated in Mantra 1, we should know that the personality of Godhead is the proprietor of everything, and that we must be satisfied with our allotted portions of the necessities of life. The purpose of all Vedic literature is to awaken this God consciousness in the forgetful living beings, and the same purpose is presented in various ways in the different scriptures of the world for the understanding of a foolish mankind. Thus, the ultimate purpose of all religions is to bring one back to Godhead. So, the same purpose is being presented, but those who do not understand that, they think the purpose of the Vedas are different. Okay, so this is there actually in that. This was Yamimam Pushpitam Vacham Pravadanti Avipashchitaha Vedavada Ratah Partha Nanyat Astiti Vadinaha Kamatmanam Swargapara Janma Karma Phalapradam Kriya Vishesha Bahulam Bhogeshware Gatim Prati. So we discussed this in the Bhagavad Gita session. Men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to heavenly planets, resultant good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification, opulent life, they say that there is nothing more than this. But actually, the purpose of the Vedas is to take one back to Godhead. Ultimate purpose of all religion is to bring one back to Godhead. So there is no contradiction. But the Vedavada Ratha people, instead of realizing that the purpose of the Vedas is to revive the forgetful soul's lost relationship with the personality of Godhead, take it for granted that such side issues as the attainment of heavenly pleasure for sense gratification, the lust for which causes their material bondage in the first place, are the ultimate end of the Vedas. So this is demoniac mentality. When we were discussing the Asurya Nama Teloka, Mantra 3, we saw this. We saw the verses from the 16th chapter. So, Kamopabhoga Parama Etavad iti Nishchitaha. This is Kama and Bhoga. This lust and enjoyment. Enjoyment because of this lust is the Parama. Kamopabhoga Parama. This is the topmost. Etavad iti Nishchitaha. And they are firmly determined in that. So, they take it for granted that such side issues as the attainment of heavenly pleasure for sense gratification are the ultimate end of the Vedas. Kama Bhoga Parama. This is the ultimate end of the Vedas. And such people misguide others by misinterpreting the Vedic literature. Sometimes they even condemn the Puranas, which are authentic Vedic explanations for laymen. Specifically pointing out to a specific sect, the Arya Samajis, who say the Vedas, what is given in the Vedas, the Shrutis, is perfect. But the understanding which is given in the Itihasas and Puranas, that is not wrong. So we'll see some Prabhupada's references. So there we will see different quotes which addresses these different type of people. So we'll look into that. The Vedavada Rathas give their own explanations of the Vedas, neglecting the authority of great teachers. They also tend to raise some unscrupulous person from among themselves and present him as the leading exponent of Vedic knowledge. So these are the characteristics of the Vedavada Rathas. And why are they doing all this? Because they do not know the ultimate purpose of the Vedic literatures. Such Vedavada Rathas are especially condemned in this mantra by the very appropriate Sanskrit word Vidyayam Rataha. Vidyayam refers to the study of the Vedas because the Vedas are the origin of all knowledge. Vidya. And Rataha means those engaged. Vidyayam Rataha thus means those engaged in the study of the Vedas. The so-called students of the Vedas are condemned herein because they are ignorant of the actual purpose of the Vedas on account of the disobeying the acharyas. So Vedic literature, this we again discussed 2 sessions back, that to gain proper transcendental knowledge, 2 things should be important. One is that the message should be Shabda Pramana, it should be coming, it should be the Vedas, which is directly coming from the Lord, and it must come in disciplic succession. Right? It must come through the bona fide Acharya system. But the Vedavadaratas, they trust only in one. Shrutis, the Vedic literature, Shabda Pramana, but then they neglect the Acharyas. And we also saw in that session how if we take only one and if we neglect the other one, then it will not lead to the spiritual life. It will not lead to the appropriate result. So this is that one example of that, the Vedavadaratas who reject the disciplic succession but are very sincere followers of the Vedas. And what is the problem with them? They do not know the purpose of the Vedas. So purpose of the Vedas can be known only when one connects himself to the disciplic succession. Okay. Just by reading the Vedas, by following the Vedas, by following all the Dharma Shastras very perfectly, according to their own family tradition, will not lead them to the highest spiritual platform. That is possible only when one connects one to the bona fide disciplic succession. So if one wants to go back to Godhead, if that's the goal, if one wants to attain the highest spiritual goal, then one must connect himself to one of these 4 paramparas in Kali Yuga. Otherwise, it's not possible. Just by reading the Vedas, just by following the Vedic, just by following Dharma Shastras, following the Vedic culture, that itself is not enough. It might purify one so that he becomes eligible to take up devotional service when he comes in contact with the devotees, or when he comes in contact with transcendental scriptures. Otherwise, just by following the Vedic culture, one cannot attain the highest goal. Parampara is very important. They do not know that the Vedic literature is a collection of extraordinary books that can be understood only through the chain of disciplic succession. Okay, so therefore that's very important. Disciplic succession is a must. One must approach a bona fide spiritual master in order to understand the transcendental message of the Vedas. That is the direction of the Mundaka Upanishad. So that was Tad Vijnanartham Sagurum Eva Vigachet Samitpani Shrotriya Brahmanishtham. This gives the qualification of that person, of that guru. Tad Vijnanartham Saguru Eva Vigachet. So who is that guru? Samitpani. He should be served. Who is Shrotriya and Brahmanishtham, who has himself learned from his spiritual master, who is coming in proper disciplic succession and is situated in Brahman, or is situated in transcendental position, or situated on the spiritual platform. This is a proper guru, and one must approach that kind of guru, who is Shrotriya and Brahmanishtham. Okay, not anyone who claims himself to be a guru or who is a scholar in the Vedas. These Vedavadarata people, however, have their own acharyas who are not in the chain of transcendental succession. So they are not in the chain of transcendental succession, but they are very learned in the Vedas. They know the intonations of the Shruti mantras. They know how to follow the different rituals of the Dharma Shastras. But they are not the actual spiritual master. Okay, they are not Shrotriya Brahmanishtham. They are not, according to Mundaka Upanishad, this text, this verse, they are not the proper spiritual master. Spiritual master means one who is dedicated to Lord Vishnu. So there are several verses which Srila Prabhupada quotes in Srimad Bhagavatam as well as in Chaitanya Charitamrita purports of how a spiritual master is one who is a Vaishnava. A Vaishnava can become a spiritual master, nobody else. Why is that? Because a Vaishnava means he belongs to a disciplic succession. He comes in a parampara and he has gained knowledge from a bona fide acharya. He is following the Vedic literatures properly, perfectly. So therefore, he is the one who is eligible to guide others. His imparting of Vidya to the ignorant people is perfect. Not of those Vedavadaratas who have their own acharyas and who are not in the chain of transcendental succession. Whatever they speak, although it seems like Vidya, but actually it is avidya. It leads to more darkness. Thus they progress into the darkness region of ignorance by misinterpreting the Vedic literature. They fall even further into ignorance than those who have no knowledge of Vedas at all. The Maya Pakita Jnana class of men are self-made gods. So after discussing Svedavada Rata, then this Maya Paharta Jnana, or those who think that they are knowledgeable, but their knowledge has been stolen by Maya, by illusion. So what about them? They think that they are self-made gods. They themselves are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such men think that they themselves are God and that there is no need of worshipping any other God. They will agree to worship an ordinary man if he happens to be rich, but they will never worship the personality of Godhead. Such men, unable to recognize their own foolishness, never consider how it is that God can be entrapped by Maya, his own illusory energy. So again, we have been discussing this in the previous mantras, how impersonalists think Maya Bhaktagyanis are those whose knowledge has been stolen by illusion, although they think that by this knowledge they are going to come out of illusion. No, the impersonalists don't come out of illusion. They remain in illusion. They are Maya Bhaktagyan. And they claim themselves to be God. We also discussed that once they understand or they do this analysis of various Upanishads, Vedanta Sutra, and come to this Jnana platform, stop doing all activities, all these karma activities that mentioned in the Vedas, they think they have achieved the level of Brahman. And followers of such people, they claim themselves or they claim that person to be God. And that's the reason why there are so many so-called incarnations, so many so-called Babajis, gods. So many people are there only because of this impersonalism, which is arisen or which arose because of this Maya Bhaktagyan. They are followers of Vedic culture. You see the Mayavadis, the followers of Shankara, they are very strict in following the Vedas and following Vedic culture. But they come under the category of Maya Bhaktagyan because of this reason. If God were ever entrapped by Maya, Maya would be more powerful than God. Such men say that God is all powerful, but they do not consider that if He is all powerful, there is no possibility of His being overpowered by Maya. We discussed this point yesterday also, that the Lord, if He's the omnipotent, when we were discussing about the omnipotence of the Lord, then at that time we discussed this, that if the living entity is omnipotent and omniscient, just like the Supreme Lord, then there is no need to beg from Him. Correct? When we were discussing this word Paribhu, which was in relation to this word Shukram, omnipotent, we discussed this. If He is the greatest of all, why does the living entity have, if the living entity is also on the same level as the Lord, being omnipotent and omniscient, why does He have to beg the Lord for His sense gratification and also for liberation? Correct? So we discussed it yesterday. So there is a difference. There is a difference between the Lord and the living entities. So those men say that God is all powerful, but they do not consider if He is all powerful, there is no possibility of His being overpowered by Maya. So if I am God, in the first place, I should not have been overpowered by Maya. I should not have been in ignorance at all. If I claim myself to be God at this point. But then they claim like this. So they are Maya Bhaktagyan. These self-made gods cannot answer all these questions very clearly. They are simply satisfied to have become God themselves, and which ultimately means they have this false prestige of being worshipped by their followers. So this is what it is. So they cannot answer these questions, that if you have become God now, what about the time when you were a small baby crying in your mother's arm, passing urine and stool, no control on your emotions, no control on your pain, nothing. But the Lord is not like that. We saw this example, no? That Krishna, when he's born, he manifests, or he manifested his transcendental pastimes right from day one. Okay. But these people, they think that by just doing some meditation, they'll come to that level and become God. But then that's nonsense. Okay. So I think that ends the purport. So it's a summary. Okay. So Vidya or real education, the aim is self-realization and spiritual values of the soul, where one understands that mind is greater than senses, intelligence is greater than the mind, and soul is greater than the intelligence. Then one should cultivate the spiritual values of the soul, and that is what is called as self-realization. Okay. So That education, okay, actually this point should come from education. That education which does not lead to spiritual realization, self-realization is avidya. Okay, and this whole block, these 6 blocks are actually the foundation of avidya. Modern or godless civilization, where the mass education is being propagated, it leads to people becoming more unhappy. There's stress on material advancement. They neglect spiritual aspect and they forget Supreme Lord is proprietor of everything. So this is what is called as avidya. Okay, and actually it's also part of vidya. That's also there. Then mass education means education advancement, and it's like a cobra decorated with a valuable jewel and decoration of a dead body. And in modern or godless civilization, karmis are engaged in sense gratification and they are called as mudas, or symbol of stupidity. Then those karmis who are engaged in sense gratification, they worship avidya, which is danger. It's dangerous and leads to darkness, darkest region of ignorance. And vidya, when it's mistaken or misguided, is even more dangerous, which leads to, again, darkness, darkest region of ignorance. Then we discussed about this Vedavada Rata. They are diverted from the purpose of Vedas. Okay, they are condemned in this mantra as Vidyayam Rataha, those who engage in the study of the Vedas but did not know the purpose of the Vedas. They are ignorant of the actual purpose. They disobey the bona fide acharyas, search out meaning to suit their own purpose. They do not know that the Vedic literatures can be understood only in disciplic succession. So they pose themselves as learned in Vedic literatures. They are not interested in knowing the personality of Godhead. They are not interested in reviving lost relationship with Him. They are fascinated by fruitive results such as attainment of heaven, and they consider lust, which causes material bondage, as the ultimate end of Vedas. Kama bhoga parama etavat iti nishtitaha. And what do they preach? They misguide others by misinterpreting the Vedas, which leads people to darkness, region of ignorance. They condemn the Puranas. They give their own explanation for the Vedas. They tend to raise some unscrupulous person as a leader, neglect the authority of the great acharyas, and have their own acharyas who are not in disciplic succession. What's the actual purpose of the Vedas? Awaken God consciousness in forgetful living beings, and it's presented in various different scriptures for foolish mankind. But ultimately, it's all meant to bring one back home, back to Godhead. And Maya Aparta Jnana, they are self-made gods. They're atheistic demons. Agree to worship an ordinary man who is rich, unable to recognize their own foolishness, cannot answer all these questions very clearly. So they are the lowest of men, Maya Aparta Jnana. Never worship the personality of Godhead, and they think how God can be entrapped by Maya, and they are simply satisfied to have become God themselves. These are the points which Śrīla Prabhupada discusses in this purport. It's a bit complicated, this diagram. I'll see if I can make it a bit simple. I'll show it to you tomorrow maybe. So now we will see some references of Śrīla Prabhupada, and then if time permits, we'll also see how different acharyas, Madhvacharya and Vedanta Desika, they interpret this Vidya and Avidya in a different manner. Okay, so we will see that if time permits. So this is from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 9, Text 10. In purport, Śrīla Prabhupada writes, therefore, one who is not situated in the principles of devotional service to the Lord should not pose himself as a religious leader of the innocent public. The Īśopaniṣad emphatically forbids this nonsense. And then Śrīla Prabhupada quotes this mantra. A person in ignorance of the principles of religion who therefore does nothing in the matter of religion is far better than a person who misguides others in the name of religion without reference to the factual religious principles of devotional service. So Prabhupada mentions this in other purports also, the same thing which we have already discussed now. Okay, so this is in reference to the Arya Samajis. Those who are Aryans strictly follow the Vedic principles. But in this age of Kali, a community has sprung up known as the Arya Samaj. They think they are Aryas. They are Aryans who follow the Vedic principles. But the community has sprung up known as Arya Samaj, whose members are ignorant of the import of the Vedas in the Parampara system. If you see Prabhupada's purport, these two things are always there. Purpose of the Vedas, the import of the Vedas, and the Parampara system. So these two things are very important. to gain transcendental knowledge, to come to the ultimate perfection of life. It's not one or the other. They decry all bona fide acharyas. And that's why we say, Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. So Guru and Sadhu, Guru is the direct link to the disciplic succession. The Sadhus are the acharyas who are in the disciplic succession. And Shastra is the Vedic literature. Okay, so these two are very important. The Vedas and the Parampara. They decry all bona fide acharyas and pose themselves as the real followers of the Vedic principles. But in fact, such non-Aryans do not follow the Vedic principles. Although they pose themselves as real followers, they actually are not following because they do not know the purpose. Another group of non-Aryans are the Jains, who are referred to in the present verse. In the context. Not only do they not follow the Vedic principles, but they have no relationship with Lord Buddha, though they claim to. Imitating the behavior of Sumati, they also claim to be the descendants of Rishabdev. Those who are Vaishnavas carefully avoid their company because they are ignorant of the path of the Vedas. So Sumati is basically the descendant of Maharaj Bharat, who is the son of Rishabdev. So the Jains, they claim that we are the followers of Sumati and therefore we belong to the disciplic section of Rishabdev. And then they imitate the activities of Rishabdev, which he actually on his transcendental, he is the Supreme Lord himself. And in his transcendental pastime, he behaved just like an Avadhuta. The Jains, they behave like an Avadhuta, although they claim that they are their followers, they do not accept the Vedic principles. More can be said, but in this point we'll stop. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Vedeshcha sarve rahame vedyaha. The real purpose of the Vedas is to understand me. This is the injunction of all Vedic literature. So what is the purpose of the Vedas? That everything that is being done, one should do it for understanding who Krishna is. And if one does not have that understanding, all his Vedic activities are actually fruitless, useless. It's tantamount to avidya. It leads him only to the darkness of this material world. So even the followers of the Vedic literature, Vedic culture, they'll go into the darkness or they'll remain in this material world. That's what it means. Because they do not know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of God and the purpose of the Vedas is to know Krishna. So just by following the Vedic culture, we cannot say, or it's not to be said that they are on the transcendental platform. No, they are not on the transcendental platform. One must understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everything is being done for his pleasure. This verse. Bhoktaram ekatapasam sarvalokam maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam gyatma maham shantim richati. People do all kinds of sacrifices. All they follow. This Vedic literature has been followed very perfectly, but they do not attain peace. Why? Because they do not know this. Bhoktaram ekatapasam. That Krishna is the Bhokta of all the Yagyas and austerities. Yagyas cover the Karma Kandis, austerities covers the Jnana Kandis, Jnana Marg followers. So he is the actual beneficiary of both, one in the Karma Kanda Marg and one in the Jnana Kanda Marg. Okay. For both, he is the Bhokta. Bhoktaram Yagya Tapasam. Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. He is the Supreme Lord of the whole universe. From him only creation comes. And Suhridam Sarvabhutana. He is the benefactor or he is the friend of all living entities. One who understands that, then he attains peace because he has established his relationship with the Lord. That's the only way to attain peace. Not through this Vedavadarata, Maya, Paharta Jnana or cultivating avidya in the name of Vidya. Srila Prabhupada specifically writes about Vidya and Avidya and gives a different perspective here. This is from Canto 4, Chapter 9, Text 40, Text 16 purport. Vidya and Avidya are very nicely described in Īśopaniṣad. It is said there that sometimes due to avidya or poor fund of knowledge, one accepts the absolute truth as ultimately impersonal. But in fact, the impersonal and personal realizations develop in proportion to the development of devotional service. The more we develop our devotional service, the more closely we approach the absolute truth, which in the beginning, when we realize the absolute truth from distant place, is manifest as impersonal. We'll read this. People in general who are under the influence of avidya shakti or maya have neither knowledge nor devotion. When a person who is a little advanced and is therefore called a jnani advances even more, he is in the category of jnana mishra bhakta, or a devotee whose love is mixed with empiric knowledge. When he is still further advanced, he can realize that the absolute truth is a person with multi-energies. An advanced devotee can understand the Lord and his creative energy. As soon as one accepts the creative energy of the absolute truth, the 6 opulences of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are also understood. Devotees who are still further advanced in full knowledge can understand the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. Only on that platform can one fully enjoy transcendental bliss. So this purport, Srila Prabhupada speaks about Vidya and Avidya. And Vidya here means devotional service. Okay, and Avidya he categorizes as this engaging in sense gratification and specifically the impersonal understanding of the Lord. Impersonal understanding of the Lord is Avidya and Vidya is personal understanding of the Lord. And how gradually one goes through those stages is what is being mentioned here. This is a different perspective of Vidya and Avidya that Srila Prabhupada gives here. And then an example is given in this connection by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, a person proceeding towards a destination. As he approaches, he sees the destination from a distant place, just as we see a city from a distance. At that time, he simply understands that the city is situated at a distance. And however, he comes still nearer, he sees the domes and flags. As soon as he enters the city, he sees various paths, gardens, lakes, and marketplaces with shops and persons buying. He sees varieties of cinema houses and he sees dancing and jubilation. When a person actually enters the city and personally sees the activities of the city, he becomes satisfied. So this is gradually from avidya to vidya, from impersonal realization to personal realization. And specifically, we have also experienced this if we are going to a mountainous region, for example, either to a yatra to a dham, we are going to this Char Dham yatra, or even to a mundane place around which is situated on a hill, or a Yerkad hill is here nearby. You see, what do we see? Not much. We see the place is there. It is situated at this many kilometers from this particular place like this. But when we go nearer and nearer, we see lot many shops, so many people, so much activities going on in that place. So as we come nearer and nearer, then there is more understanding of that particular place. There is more realization of that particular place. So attaining the Supreme Lord is just like that. From far off, he looks impersonal. But as we go nearer and nearer to him, through the process of devotional service, then he manifests or he reveals his personality. And then we see him as a person, how he's not different from his name, form, qualities, pastimes. What are his pastimes? Who are all his devotees? Like this. So this is proper understanding. So this is for Vedavadarata. In Krishna book, Srila Prabhupada writes, deity worship in the temple has been in existence since the beginning of Vedic culture. There is a class of men described in the Bhagavad Gita as Vedavadarata. They believe only in the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies but not in temple worship. Such foolish people may here take note that although this marriage of Krishna and Rukmini took place more than 5,000 years ago, there were arrangements for temple worship. Okay, so Vedavadaratas, these people do not accept deity worship. And this also again it relates to the Arya Samajis or people like them who take only the Shrutis. And all the sacrifices are meant to attain a particular purpose. But temple worship is very specifically mentioned in the Itihasas and Puranas. In fact, all the Puranas, they have very elaborate system of worshipping the deities in the temple. So all those details are mentioned in the Puranas and Itihasas, but not specifically deity worship or temple worship is not mentioned in the Shrutis. So those who believe only in the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies or the Shruti and not the Smriti, they do not do temple worship, but they are Vedavadarata people. This again from Krishna book. Anyone who follows the footsteps of recognized devotees such as Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, the Kumaras, Manu, Kapila, King Prahlad, King Janak, Shukdev Goswami, Yamaraj, and their followers in disciplic succession very easily finds the door of liberation open. On the other hand, those who are not devotees but are engaged in uncertain processes of self-realization such as jnana, yoga and karma are understood to be still contaminated. So there is also an understanding that there are different paths to reach the absolute truth. Jnana marg is there, then karma marg is there. Krishna speaks about different kinds of yogas, and all these yogas will ultimately lead one to the absolute truth. Jnana Yoga is there, Karma Yoga is there, Ashtanga Yoga is there, or different Sankhya Yoga is there. All these yogas will ultimately lead one to the absolute truth. But then the understanding should be there that just by doing Jnana Yoga without Bhakti, it will not lead to the highest platform. These are all supporting processes, these are supporting principles which helps one's conditioned nature, not helps conditioned nature, but helps one to come out of the conditioned nature. It purifies one who's attracted to this Jnana Marg, then he can cultivate knowledge. But what kind of knowledge? That which leads him to devotional service of the Lord. Ashtanga Yoga should be performed. For what purpose? So that the senses are not unnecessarily agitating him and he can fix his mind on the Supreme Personality of God. So therefore, Ashtanga Yoga supports Bhakti Yoga. Karma Yoga is done so that one engages in his own prescribed duties and then through that he worships the Lord. You have seen this before. Varnashrama Charvata Purushena Parapuman Vishnu Aradhate Pantha. This is the way of worshipping Vishnu. So one who is materially contaminated, who has this tendency to perform karma, he must engage in prescribed duties as a service to the Lord. So that is accepted as devotional service. So bhakti should be there. The idea should be that the attitude should be there that one has to render devotional service unto the Lord. And these are just different ways in which one can do that. Karma Yoga is one way, Jnana Yoga is one way. But ultimately, the base or the essence of all that is devotional service, is Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga supports all other yogas. Okay, so these yogas on their own are not enough to take one back home, back to God, to take one to the supreme absolute truth, to perfect realization. They can support, their support, or the basement is devotional service, Bhakti Yoga. All these different yogas are only to support devotional service. So that's why in Prabhupada's purport we will see, whenever Karma Yoga is mentioned, we speak about devotional service. Everywhere, all the different types of yogas which are mentioned, Prabhupada is speaking only about devotional service, because that is proper understanding. That is Bhagavad Gita as it is. Otherwise, people criticize. So Prabhupada scholars criticize that Krishna is speaking about Karma Yoga in chapter 3 and 5, but you are saying devotional service. Krishna is speaking about Jnana Yoga in the later chapters and also in the 4th chapter, but you are saying devotional service. Bhakti is there only in 6 chapters. It's one of the methods. Not other 12 chapters or something else. There are different types of yoga. So why are you saying that devotional service is the only means? But no, one should understand the purpose. Otherwise, it's a problem. Okay, where were we? Yes. Such contaminated persons, although apparently advanced in self-realization, cannot liberate even themselves, or to speak of those who follow them. Such non-devotees are compared to chained animals, for they are not able to go beyond the jurisdiction of the formalities of a certain type of faith. And they are also chained to this material world through the modes. So Krishna says, no, I think it will come here. Yes. In the Bhagavad Gita, they are condemned as Vedavadarata. They cannot understand that the Vedas deal with the activities of the material modes of nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. Traigunya Vishaya Veda, Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna, Ridandvo Sattvasto, Niryoga Kshema Asmavan. So this Veda, they speak about the 3 modes. But as Lord Krishna advised Arjuna, one has to go beyond the jurisdiction of the duties prescribed in the Vedas and take to Krishna consciousness, devotional service. Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita, Nistari Gunya Bhavarjuna. My dear Arjuna, just try to become transcendental to the Vedic rituals. This transcendental position beyond the Vedic ritualistic performances is devotional service. Now, there might be some questions here, or the question should come actually. Because Krishna says that this Traigunya Vishaya Veda, the Vedas are Traigunya, they speak about only these 3 modes. But if we see from our previous sessions, we have been speaking about Vedic epistemology. We have been speaking that Shruti mantras are to be accepted as it is. And they are coming directly from the Lord. So why is Krishna speaking about, or why Krishna's word? Krishna gave the Vedic literatures, that for the proof we have already seen that. And now Krishna himself is saying that the Vedas are speaking only about the 3 modes. What's the purpose? Does Krishna want the living entities to be in this material world? Correct? He's speaking the Vedas but the Vedas are on the three modes. So how do we understand this? So this is what is being addressed in this mantra and also in the purports, where it says that one must know the purpose of the Vedas. If we know the purpose, then although the Vedic mantras or the karmakandi activities or the Vedas are said to be in the three modes, but one who knows the purpose behind that, he can get himself purified by following these Shruti mantras itself. Okay, so the purpose behind it must be known. Purpose behind the Vedas must be known. And it's simple. The purpose behind that is Krishna. Vedesha sarved ahameva vedyaha. That's why this is a very nice sutra. From all the Vedas, Krishna is to be known. And if by following the activities of the Vedas, one can get to that position, then it is proper. It can be done. So this we will see in the 11th mantra, where we are speaking about Vidya and Avidya, and also in the 14th mantra, which is speaking about demigod worship, impersonal worship, and the worship of the Supreme Lord. So there we'll discuss it a little more. Srila Prabhupada writes about this in the purport. So purpose is to be known. Then it is transcendental. One should not entangle himself only in the Vedic activities by not knowing its purpose. Okay, my dear Arjuna, just try to become transcendental to the Vedic rituals. How can one become transcendental to the Vedic rituals? One who knows the purpose behind that. One who is doing that only for pleasing Krishna. Although it is not perfect, pure devotional service, but then it is still accepted by the Lord. And that is why Krishna will also speak about prescribed duties. Following the prescribed duties. Prescribed duties are recommended in the Vedas. Right? Annad bhavanti bhutani, parjanyadana sambhavaha, yajnat bhavati parjanyo, yajna karma samudbhavaha. Like that, the whole, and Krishna also speaks, yajnathat karmano nyatra lokoyam karma bandhanaha. So karma must be done. And where is the karma prescribed? It's prescribed in the Vedic literatures. And here is saying the Vedas are Trigunya Vishaya Veda. But then it should be performed for yajna, for Krishna. Yajnathat karmano nyatra. Otherwise, lokoyam karma bandhana. Then it binds. If you do the Vedic, if you follow the Vedas, just for your own sense enjoyment, for keeping yourself in the center, then it binds. But if it is done for the sake of Krishna, then it liberates. It purifies the living entity. So therefore, when Krishna is saying, my dear Arjuna, just try to become transcendental to the Vedic rituals, he's saying, don't focus only on the rituals. Perform a prescribed duty for the sake of the Supreme Lord, for the sake of myself. And we have discussed this actually in Bhagavad Gita in each of these verses. So this transcendental position beyond the Vedic ritualistic performances is devotional service. Then he speaks in about Maya Paharita Jnana from 715 itself. They are those people whose erudite knowledge has been nullified by the influence of illusory material energy. They are learned fellows, philosophers, poets, literati, scientists like this. But illusory energy misguides them and therefore disobey the Supreme Lord. So all the unauthorized interpretations of the Gita by the class of Maya Pratyajnana outside the purview of the Parampara system are so many stumbling blocks on the path of spiritual understanding. So we discussed again this yesterday. There is commentary that people write on Bhagavad Gita, all the 600, 700 commentaries that they wrote according to what Śrīla Prabhupada writes in the introduction, they're all stumbling blocks because they're not coming in Parampara, in disciplic line. Okay, so yes, we'll just read this. This is from Civilization and Transcendence. This book, a small book. The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmana, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater. That is a learned man, not this degree holder. A degree holder who has no tapasya and no character. Krishna says is Maya Paharita Jnana. His knowledge is stolen by illusion. Although he has learned so many things, nonetheless, Maya has taken away his knowledge. He's a rascal. He's an animal. This is the perspective of Vedic civilization. Okay. So, mundane education has no standing in self-realization. So, one should not think that if I get educated, it will help me in Krishna consciousness. No. Devotion will help in Krishna consciousness, not mundane education. So, yeah, we have some 5 minutes. So, we'll just see the interpretation that Madhvacharya gives and also other acharyas about this Vidya and Avidya, specific to this verse. So, one thing we should understand is that it is their interpretation of Vidya and Avidya. So, we should not be comparing this with what Śrīla Prabhupada says as Vidya and Avidya. Okay. So, it's an interpretation which gives the proper Siddhanta. So it's not contradictory. We should not take it as contradictory or something which is not approved of by Srila Prabhupada. It is approved of by Srila Prabhupada, but the context or the interpretation or the perspective that different acharyas give is a bit different from how Srila Prabhupada defines it. Srila Prabhupada's presentation is specifically for preaching purposes, where one can understand this material education is bogus. This advancement in the name of knowledge is bogus, like this. But we see Madhvacharya, what he writes: those who worship with false knowledge fall into blinding darkness, and those who worship with true knowledge alone, without correcting false knowledge, fall into even greater darkness. Okay, I'll explain what it is. Actually, he only explains. Without doubt, now he quotes from Kurma Purana, it's a translation. Without doubt, the worshippers of deities other than Vishnu go to blinding darkness because they do not know the position of Lord Vishnu. They are in avidya. So they go to blinding darkness because they are worshippers of other deities other than Vishnu. But even more so are those who do not criticize them. Okay, so this is Madhvacharya's mood, that not only I should propagate that Vishnu is the Supreme Lord, I should also destroy those who are against him, specifically referring to the Mayavadis. Those who know Narayana in his true form, free from faults, and simultaneously criticize those with false knowledge of Vishnu are the true devotees. By criticizing false knowledge, which is full of sorrow and ignorance, they cross over sorrow and ignorance. By knowing the complete truth, which is full of bliss and knowledge, they attain bliss and knowledge. This is similar spoken to what spoken in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Prema pracharan ara pashanda dalan, dui kare avadhuta karena brahman. For two purposes, to spread the cult of bhakti and to defeat and subdue the atheists, Lord Nityananda, the most dedicated devotee of the Lord, moved throughout the country. And Srila Prabhupada moved throughout the universe, or not the universe, maybe he's moving the universe, but in this whole world for this purpose. He established Krishna as the Supreme Lord. He established our transcendental position. He gave us the knowledge of our relationship with the Lord. And apart from that, he also destroyed the misgivings which are there, the Pashandis who are there. He spoke so much about modern civilization, about the atheists, about impersonalists. So he did both. So he is a pure devotee. He is the Pakka, true devotee according to Madhvacharya. And we as his followers are also supposed to do this. Pashandadalan also should be there. This is Madhvacharya's interpretation. Vedanta says, those who are absorbed in performance of prescribed actions without knowledge, means those who do karma without jnana, enter into darkness. But those who engage only in knowledge, only in jnana, while neglecting the performance of prescribed duties, karma, enter into even greater darkness. This is those who follow the karma path for worshipping the Lord, or rather, prescribed actions without knowledge. So they follow the karma kanda rituals, but they have no knowledge about the purpose behind the Vedas. So they are into darkness. They are going to darkness. But those who engage in knowledge at Jnana Marg, only to attain the impersonal liberation, while neglecting the performance of prescribed duties, enter into even greater darkness. Impersonalists go even into greater darkness, while the karma kandis, they go to darkness only. So, okay, so here he says, right? The teacher in this verse criticizes the practice of karma alone and knowledge alone. Karma alone and jnana alone. And states that the highest goal will be achieved only by cultivating knowledge along with the practice of varnashram. So this he will tell in mantra 11. Okay, but introduction to that is given here. Those who are excessively attached to enjoyment and power perform with absorbed mind karma devoid of jnana, enter into very dense ignorance. Avidya is equal to karma in the following verse. Avidya karma samgyanya tritiya shaktir ishyate. There is third energy called avidya. So this verse from Vishnu Puran speaks about the energies of the Lord. It speaks about the spiritual energy, the marginal energy, and the material energy. Means internal potency, external potency, and marginal potency. And karma is specifically defined as the external potency of the Lord. One who engages in karma is bound to this material world, is chained to this material world. Or they enter the place of suffering inevitably caused by absorption, artha, dharma, and kama without moksha. The writers on the subject declare the continual suffering of those engaged only in karma. And he quotes from Mundaka Upanishad. engaged in jnana only. Those who engage only in knowledge, giving up karma suitable to their qualifications, enter into even greater ignorance, and those absorbed in karma alone. Okay, and why is it so? Cultivation of vidya alone, without previously performing karma, lead to worse darkness because it lead to failure. One will neither attain liberation nor the purification that karma brings. To practice, or this is the conclusion, to practice impersonal knowledge is very difficult, for all activities are considered to be material. So karma is considered to be material. So they engage only in impersonalistic meditation. But because they have not been purified, their sinful tendencies or the contaminated tendencies are not yet purified by performance of karma, they cannot engage themselves in impersonal meditation. Okay, they are not qualified for that. So this is also spoken in the 6th chapter of Yoga Rudha, Yoga Rurukshu stage, right? If you remember, there it was mentioned. So karma brings purification of conditioned activities. Just without this purification, if one engages in impersonal knowledge, then it's very difficult for him. Baldev Vidyabhushan Prabhu writes, those who engage solely in karma attain blind ignorance, and those who engage solely in jnana attain even greater ignorance. So this is in line with Vedanta Desika. Now the Upanishad speaks to the person who desire to live their lives simply performing prescribed actions without knowledge of the Atma, which was previously discussed. So knowledge of the Supreme Lord and knowledge of the Atma was discussed in the previous mantras. And those who perform prescribed actions without this knowledge, without following what is said in the previous mantras, they enter into even greater darkness. In these verses, there is, okay, this and the next 5 mantras are in Anushtup meter. So they actually come as a group, as we discussed. In these verses, there is criticism of both karma and jnana when they are performed independent of each other. Okay, so those living beings who perform only karma, which is the opposite of knowledge, who perform actions to attain swarga, enter into darkness. But those who cultivate only impersonal Atma Gyan enter into even worse state of ignorance than the blind state of repeated birth and death. Okay, and Krishna also speaks this Tetam Bhukta Swargalokam Vishalam, Shine Punya Marti Lokam Vishanti, Evam Trai Dharma Anuprapanna, Gatagatam Kamaka Bhalavante. Those who are cultivating avidya, they come back to the cycle of repeated birth and death. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says, one who is situated in ignorance goes to the region of darkness. One engaged in knowledge goes to even darker region. So ignorance, he cultivates a material life, which is basically karma, one who is engaged in karma. So all the acharyas, except Madhvacharya, they have the same perspective. So one who is seeking impersonal liberation goes to even greater darkness. And he says, Paramatma has inconceivable energy. Parasi Shakti Videv Shruvate. One of the energies is called Maya. By this Maya, Paramatma creates this world. Maya has 2 functions, Vidya and Avidya. The Vidya function destroys matter, and Avidya function creates matter. Those men engaged in matter are situated in the Avidya function, and their spiritual nature is covered by the darkness of matter. Those who become detached from matter, though able to destroy matter, okay, see here Vidya is defined as the Vidya function destroys matter. Okay, means knowledge should destroy matter. But what does Bhaktivinoda Thakur say? Those who become detached from matter, though able to destroy matter with the Vidya function, do not receive the shelter of the Lord's spiritual Shakti unless they perform bhakti. So therefore they go to even greater darkness. Thus they, absorbed in Vidya, enter into a darker region where the Atma seems to be destroyed. Again referring to the impersonal liberation. Because by that Vidya, the transcendental knowledge is supposed to destroy matter. But it not only destroys matter, it destroys Atma also, according to their interpretation. So therefore, they enter into a darker region. If the Jiva does not establish a relation with Paramatma in this material world, he cannot be liberated from matter. When a person gives up the variety of qualities found in this world as despicable, and he thus becomes attracted to something without qualities, which creates a greater obstacle for the Jiva. So this is why it is said that one goes into greater darkness, because it creates a greater obstacle for the Jiva to come to understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Srila Prabhupada speaks about this in the purport. I think it's there in Bhagavad Gita itself. Yeah, I should have given that quote. I should have brought that quote here, but somehow I missed. Where he says that, I don't exactly remember, that those who are engaged in sense gratification, they can be at least brought to devotional life. But those who are impersonalists, there's no hope for them. It's very difficult because they have this false pride that they're already in Vidya. And that who are you to give me Vidya? I'm already situated in transcendental knowledge, and somehow you're coming that you know more than me. I will not accept. It's very difficult for them. But those who engage only in sense gratification, then it can be shown to him that he's actually in avidya, birth, death, old age, and disease. Everything is temporary in this material world. It can be made, it will make some sense to him. But then to an impersonalist, he would already know all this, so he will not listen. Therefore, he goes to greater darkness. He's more tamoguna. And then he finally quotes this Yenir Vidakshadamuktamanus, Tvayasta Bhavada Vishuddha Buddhaya, Aruha Krichina Paramparam Tata, Patantyado Anadata Vishwadangrayaha. They fall down from their position of imagined superiority because they have no regard for your lotus feet. Okay, so this is the understanding of the Acharyas. And so, any questions? We are out of time. So, do you have any questions? This we can discuss that. So the only thing we should understand is Vidya and Avidya here, and how Vidya has been explained in this mantra, how Avidya is explained in this mantra, and with that perspective, move on to next mantras 10 and 11 with proper understanding. Okay. Yes, Prabhu.
In the class, the cultivation of material knowledge is worse, even worse than the cultivation of personal knowledge.
Yes.
So when we see this modern civilization is mostly based on the persons, we also hear that.
Yes.
So how do we resolve this?
No, I'm not able to get the question. Sorry.
The first point you got it.
Yes, I got that. So the first part of the question is that material knowledge leads to mass education leads to darkness, or material. Okay, so this knowledge, cultivation of knowledge is worse, and even worse than that, or worst is this impersonal understanding. Yes.
So now we also hear that this modern civilization, material knowledge,
yes,
is also based on the impersonalistic philosophy.
So we also hear that this modern knowledge is based on impersonalistic philosophy.
What we are referring to is material knowledge.
So what are we referring to when we speak about material knowledge? Okay. So this is the question. So the question is material knowledge is worse, leads to darkness, and impersonalism leads to even greater darkness. But the idea here is that this whole material education, mass education itself is based on impersonalism. So how do we understand that material education is kind, in one way comparatively better than this impersonalistic understanding? Is that right?
It's the cultivation of material knowledge.
So what is the cultivation of knowledge that we are referring to? Okay. So this cultivation of knowledge is for our own sense gratification. Okay. Cultivation of knowledge which leads only to more sense gratification. That is worse. And we have been discussing, when we see the Acharya's comment specifically, they have said karma is darkness. So this education is materialistic education which is driven to enjoy one's senses, and karma means one tries to enjoy oneself in this material world. Okay, so that's what it is. Even more darkness is this impersonalism. Okay, because it's a big obstacle for the jiva to come out of this material world. Now it is also said that this modern education is based on impersonalism. Okay, so it actually complicates the situation more. Okay, and it is impersonal education, we say, because we have been discussing this in the previous mantras also, that modern society is based more on impersonalism because one sees everybody as his object of sense gratification. Okay, he does not see the other person as a person with qualities whom I should serve or whom I should have a relationship with. The basis of my relationship with anything in this material world, whether a person or an object, is because he satisfies my senses or it satisfies my senses. Okay, so we have put ourselves in the center very rigidly. Very rigidly, we have put ourselves in the center, and whoever can give me sense gratification or whoever can fulfill my desires, I will use him. Okay, so when this idea or this attitude is there that I will use that person or that object only for myself without any consideration of that person, then it is impersonalism. We are not seeing them as a person. There's no personality involved. There is impersonalism only involved. So mass education is said to be based on impersonalism because it promotes sense gratification. It promotes hedonism, where only one is kept oneself in the center and everything else is seen as an object of my own sense gratification. So that is based on impersonalism. And finally, and because it's sense gratification which is at the center, therefore the more and more one becomes educated, the more and more impersonal one becomes, and the more and more sense gratification he gets involved into. Okay, so that is how we should understand. So finally, ultimately, with mass education, we say that's going to darkness, and impersonal is even more darkness, but mass education is leading to that impersonalism only. So it's leading to even more and more darkness, like progression on the same path towards darkness. Okay, anything else? Yes. No, see, that's what I said. The Acharya's commentaries give a different perspective. Acharya's commentary, when they speak about avidya, they speak about karma kanda activities. Karma. Okay. And when they speak about vidya, they speak about impersonal liberation, jnana. But here, Srila Prabhupada is speaking about avidya as sense gratification. Okay. And vidya as sense gratification which leads or which is even more dark because it's guiding, it's cheating other people. Okay, so that mass education, the education which leads to sense gratification. Normal sense gratification is avidya, but education or vidya which helps or which promotes this sense gratification, it is even more dangerous. That is Prabhupada, that's how he writes. Okay, so he is not talking about impersonal liberation here. Impersonal liberation is being spoken about in Acharya's commentaries. Here is specifically speaking about those people who, the Vedavada Rathas or the Maya Paharita Jnanas or the mass education people. Now, these three things is what we see. When Srila Prabhupada is speaking about Vidya here, we first saw about this mass education, which is leading even the simple people towards gross sense gratification, giving them hopes that they can be happy. That's the first part, mass education part. Then we saw about this Vedavada Ratha, the followers of the Vedic literatures who say that karma is what it is, going to the Swarga is the best, and therefore we should do that. And the third category of those who belong to this Vidya, according to Srila Prabhupada's purport, this is Maya Paharita Jnana, who claim themselves to be God because they have attained some kind of understanding. So these are the three people. So here, now we can say Maya Paharita Jnana, in Prabhupada's reference, it's mentioned they are the impersonalist. So in that sense, we can understand. Okay, Vedavada Rathas also, they are karma kandis. They are completely engaged only in their prescribed duties without knowing the purpose of the Vedas. And the mass education, where there is no question of any Vedic concept at all, geared only towards sense gratification. So all these three belong to Vidya. Avidya here means general. You come in this material world, you have this body, you engage in sense gratification. If you engage in sense gratification, you go to darkness. Sure. But then there are people who cultivate knowledge only for the same purpose. They go into greater darkness because they do not understand the real purpose. They do not understand. Education, mass education. Education is meant to elevate people. But how is it elevating? It's elevating people in sense gratification. Or actually not elevating, but degrading people into sense gratification. So that kind of education is bogus. That Vidya will lead to darkness. Vedavadartha, Karmakanda activities, Vedic literature one should follow to get to the absolute platform. But what is happening? They are leading him only to sense gratification, to the heavenly planets. And then he has to go through the cycle of birth and death. So that Vidya is also misleading. Maya Paharita Jnana, again misleading. So this Vidya is even more dangerous because in the name of Vidya, it's cheating people, saying there are different goals that you have to attain, but not devotional service. Avidya people are already not doing devotional service, sense gratification, they're already going to darkness. But when we claim that Vidya will lead to different goals and this is what your goal should be, not Krishna consciousness, it's even more dangerous. Not spiritual life, it's more dangerous. Mass education, so many universities, but they are not speaking about the science of the soul. Srila Prabhupada said this. They are not speaking about Krishna consciousness. So they are slaughterhouse education. No, they are leading people to slaughterhouses. It's not proper. Those who are followers of the Vedas, they are not speaking about this. Actually, if we go and speak to this Brahmanas who are following Vedic culture very strictly, and we ask him what is the purpose of the Vedas, they say the purpose of the Vedas is manifold. So many. This is like a Vedic. This is like a what is it? Desire fulfilling tree. Whatever desire you have, it will fulfill that. There is no direct purpose. There is no one single purpose behind the Vedas. Whatever you desire, it will fulfill. That's all. So is that the purpose behind the Vedas? No. Īśopaniṣad is very clear. The purpose behind the Vedas is Īśāvāsamidam Sarvam. That understanding should be there. That is the proper understanding of the Vedas. But the Vedavadatas will not say that. Although they claim they are following the Vedas, they are cultivating Vidya, they are cultivating knowledge. But that knowledge does not lead to Krishna. That knowledge does not lead to spiritual life. So they are all different manifestations of Vidya who are actually propagating avidya in the name of Vidya. So this is what we discussed in this month. Okay, let's stop. Śrīla Prabhupada ki, Śrī Īśopaniṣad ki.